Chapter 2. How the hell did everything turn out this way? 3 years earlier. Oliver awoke in a very hopeful and pleasant mood. Sure, he had been rejected countless times, and it was starting to become an unlucky pattern that continued to wear against him. But those were the woes of yesterday, and today was going to be different. He was going to be accepted by one of the colony cities, right? He wondered what could possibly be wrong with him. His IQ was above average at 128, and the rest of his psych evaluation showed all the right signs it could easily pass him. He was still in peak shape at 39, even though to him he thought his youth was slipping away. That was only his thoughts and insecurities. No way should those self-reflections be held against him. Was it because he had withheld these feelings from the tester and lied about his own worries and doubts? He hadn't been hooked up to a machine and questioned like a criminal, so how could they have known the hidden secrets of his heart without his own volition of the matter? What real doubts did he have? Turning 40 was slowly creeping into his head, and the issue was for whatever reason making more waves against his emotions than it should have been causing. Was it just the conditioning that he had grown up with and had been ingrained into believing? Once you turned 40, did that mean that you were over the hill? Was that where the downward slope of his health began? Was Oliver becoming old? Was he slipping past his prime and turning into a decrepit old man? Maybe it was weighing more on his mind now because it had been 10 years since he first applied to the first colony, and still the results hadn't changed. We are very sorry to inform you, but your application cannot be accepted at this time. It felt like his whole life was speeding away from him at an unruly pace, and now that Oliver understood why his doubts were leaving his subconscious and seeping into the light, he braced hard mentally, awaiting the emotional flood to subside and leave him where he was. A blinking icon started to dance in his vision, hovering in midair. It was in the shape of an old-fashioned letter, with little wings on the sides and legs with running shoes. Attached were big, endearing eyes that said, "I got something for you." The cartoon letter wasn't really there, but rather a holographic image displayed to him by the small tech contact lenses covering his eyes. The technology was nothing new, but the pair he was wearing was the latest and most expensive. Often, when questioned over the cost, Oliver would say that while expensive it may be, we all have our own vices. The contact lenses were called a hopper, otherwise known as a holographic optical projecting personal enhanced reality. His was the newest version, the Hopper 4. It had only been out for the last month and had set Oliver's account balance dangerously close to the negatives. It was, however, a very ingenious device and was great for work and entertainment purposes. Oliver used it for both. Watching movies was just the most basic of its functions and could whisk the viewer away to any desired viewing pleasure. From watching movies as if you were in a theater, to projecting a screen only you could see anywhere you desired, it could be as large as your appetite and imagination yearned for. The limits were very small on the device's versatility, and beyond watching recorded videos, it could also allow the viewer full immersive experiences with whatever they were seeing. Games on the device were its highlighted attraction and could capture you and send you to a world completely tailored to whatever tickled your fancy. It was this feature that Oliver enjoyed the most. He owned every popular game released and even many of the lesser-known games for the device. Of course, the device needed an added pair of headphones or other listening devices to get the full experience, but like all things, those were sold separately. Oliver didn't have lots of time for his Hopper 4's entertainment side. His job took a good amount of his time, and then there was his wife, Abby, whom he had been married to for over 15 years. She was a self-sufficient woman who allowed Oliver plenty of time for his hobbies. However, their relationship had lasted this long by his ability to sacrifice his free time for spending more time with her. This included romantic dinners to simple walks in the park. Their relationship was far from perfect, but together they complemented each other, and over the years they had learned each other's quirks and hot-button topics. Their heavy fighting ended after the 7-year mark, as they learned to think more of each other as a single unit rather than two separate people. The fighting and disagreements dwindled, never ended, but were at an all-time low. Oliver believed that a happy marriage is one based on openness and understanding with both parties, and worrying about the other's needs. Being willing to compromise without bitterness or real complaints, it takes a long time, and Oliver would say it has taken 15 years and counting to get where he could safely say he was happily married. The blinking image of the cartoon envelope finished notifying Oliver and zipped back out of his eyesight. "Right," said Oliver out loud. He decided to stop contemplating about what the message said inside. Was it the awaited acceptance letter from Colony Affairs? Or was it the dreaded and disappointing rejection letter that Oliver believed it would be? "And to think I woke up in a good mood," mumbled Oliver as he moved his hand and gestured for the Hopper 4 to switch to its menu. A working HUD, custom designed by him, held many floating icons. With nimble fingers, he selected the male icon and pulled up the accursed letter that had his stomach doing flips. His vision narrowed as he read the floating screen. The letter held only 7 lines of words, and he read everything within a few moments. The words were stuck in his mind, and Oliver had to reread that short message over a dozen times before he truly believed what it said. Oliver and Abigail Pierce were headed for Leonov, one of the domed cities on the moon. Located in the Leonov crater, roughly 33 kilometers in diameter, the city was one of the 32 wonders of modern science and space colonization. Sure, there were 18 cities on Mars, and a space station orbiting Jupiter. Then there was another around Venus, and one long-range space explorer ship headed towards Neptune. But after striking out over 17 times to get clearance to leave Earth and get a position at any space colony, Oliver and Abigail were happy with their posting. Leonov was graded as the 7th largest lunar cities. Abigail would have preferred admission from Pythagoras City. However, those dreams departed last year when the rejection letter read, "We regret to inform you." It was wishful thinking anyway. Neither Oliver nor Abigail had amazing credentials for space travel. While it helped that Oliver was a biologist with a minor in xenobiology theory, Abigail was an artificial intelligence researcher. Although she was the most esteemed and fought after in her field, the openings for them as a package deal were slim when it came to Lunar Colony Initiative. Their skills and resumes had been turned down again and again. Abigail, like Oliver, wished for a life in the stars, or at least somewhere else besides Earth. She could have contested and resubmitted an inquiry to the board administrators of lunar affairs many times, but ultimately had decided against it. Her father was the problem. She knew it was him all those years stopping the requests from being accepted. What was she to do, though? She hated herself for keeping the secret from Oliver, but if he ever found out, it would devastate him. That sealed her resolve over the matter, and as far as she was concerned, the problem had solved itself. Her dad had passed away 4 months ago, and while she loved the man and would hate herself forever over the truth, she was glad he was dead. He had controlled every aspect of her life besides her marriage to Oliver, and yet some nights she would lay awake at night, wondering what dark and twisted plan her father had engineered with her marriage. She and Oliver had had a rocky start, and their first few years were bleak at best. She had threatened to leave him, and at times almost did. Every time she would remind herself that as she backed out of this marriage and let space grow between them, it was only a matter of time before she was back into her father's watchful care. And the simple fact of the matter was, the fighting made her know Oliver was genuine. Her father had manipulated everyone into what he wanted, but never in a way that forced a fight or caused outward emotions. Oliver was the opposite of that. He wore his emotions on his sleeve and was always sharing and expressing himself, whether or not it hurt her feelings. In the end, they had grown and learned the natures of the other, and while he had softened and learned to control his self-centered emotions and whims for hers, she had learned to trust him. She had also learned to let her guard down into knowing his motives were not a scheme to control or manipulate her into his goals and desires. Oliver and Abigail quickly started rearranging their lives for the big move. Now that they were cleared and headed for the moon, that meant they had a lot to do and very little time to do it in. First, the issue with moving to the moon is clearing your schedule. Work was done for the time being, so all current tasks were either passed off or finished. For Oliver, this was a bigger deal since he was a teacher at a local university. Moreover, he had gained tenure almost 2 years ago, but now he was moving to the moon. His students and assignments were cast to the wind, and a replacement teacher would have to gather them up and continue where he left off. The Lunar Initiative was dragging its feet and still hadn't made it super clear on what his new job would be. Abigail decided to not panic and stress over this factor without further discovery. For her part, her job was basically staying the same with a small caveat. While she would stay employed by the same company and continue her research from the moon, her new direction would be to help implement her research code into the new experimental weapons in development. They were calling them Quib rifles, a shorthand name that stood for Quantum Intelligence Bioorganic Rifles. Their second issue, the pair faced, was giving up everything they owned. To leave Earth and zip off to the moon required all their financial affairs to be transferred if possible, or ended in any other situation. It was stressful preparing for their trip that would take them to their new home. Space travel was not like it was in the 21st century. Time had updated many of its old ways. Still, the trip was a bit more intense than an airplane ride across the ocean. You were allowed very few items to take with you into space, the ship being limited for personal items. You could take more than what you were wearing, but the list of items you could take were very small compared to the amount of things forbidden or restricted. That's one of the jokes that the first-time pioneers discovered after being issued badges for their flight. You basically have a one-way ticket to having all your belongings being sold or given away. Paper money is useless, so make sure that it's all deposited. Your bank account balance will be transferred to the local exchange for lunar accounting. Right now, the conversion for dollars to lunars is about 0.89. So whatever you had in savings just got 11% taken from it. Currency is used for all personal vices and entertainment, but the good thing about the moon is your admission comes with free room and board. That meant, while the basics came free, any pleasures and extra accommodations came with added costs. Abigail found that after selling everything they weren't taking, and gifting everything that was left, their balance to take with them was good enough to get them by. Oliver thought that his purchase of his Hopper 4 was perfectly timed and would save them all the money as far as his tastes were concerned. Oliver didn't drink, he hadn't smoked since he was 22, and now he could only wince at himself that he had smoked for 5 years longer than he should have. His cravings for Jell-O were the worst of his eating habits, if you could even call those bad. And as luck had it, Jell-O was included in meals allowed. Abigail did plan on dipping into the funds every once in a while, without overindulging. She had a hankering for a glass of wine more often than she cared to admit. Her job included many long nights of staring at code and slamming her head against the wall on this week's computations or this string of algorithms. She had so many accolades from her field of artificial intelligence research. The breakthroughs she alone was responsible for was an amazingly long list. Sometimes she thought, this requires a celebration. And what celebration can be had without a bottle of wine? Or maybe a few bottles. After finishing a big project or solving a pain-in-the-ass problem, she needed to relax. She felt every aspect of her life demanded her to be so damn focused, and above all else, brilliant. At the end of the day, she wanted to turn her brain off and settle into a nice bottle of bubbles, and save the worries for the next day. Departure was tomorrow, and Oliver decided to start the day off by going on a free run, otherwise known to him as parkour. Granted, an odd way to clear one's head, but for Oliver it was a choice he loved making. It could have been a dumb choice, when risk of injury could ruin everything and cancel their admission to Leonov, and still he hadn't questioned his motives. He left out his front door and into the city streets, running like a man without a care in the world. Today that couldn't have been more true, as Oliver came to a raised wall with a walkway about 10 feet off the ground. Parkour! And over he went, making the leap look like child's play, while dodging some other obstructions with ease. As he found the normal walkway, he continued jogging along like nothing out of the ordinary happened. It had always been this way of letting go of stress, scaling obstructions and jumping gaps, little stunts along his workout that filled him with excitement. The danger was real. A few times he had twisted his ankle or scraped a knee. The injuries were thankfully never anything major. Luck had given way to boldness and extra risk. Oliver had learned parkour from his cousin Adam, who was 2 years older than him. Couldn't have been more than 12 or 13, running around places he had no business belonging for a kid his age. He would climb onto roofs and then jump from one roof to another. The stunts Adam and Oliver accomplished without broken bones or real injury was astonishing, but the trouble they had gotten into with their parents was less than perfect. Oliver was forbidden from seeing Adam one summer after the pair had climbed to the top of a 30-story parking garage. The whole time they had dangled along the outside railing. Then, when they made it to the top, they would sprint jump between the inside gap that separated the levels from floor to floor in a curving spiral. They were best friends and rival enemies over everything. Competition against one another was always pushing the mark of what the other could do to outbest the other. When Oliver was 16, Adam joined a branch of the military because the world always seemed to find reasons to fight each other, and times never change. Adam was older, so he decided to beat Oliver to the punch to serve his country and prove how much of a badass and a hero he could be. He sent letters to Oliver like clockwork. Every 3 weeks a new letter would come, detailing in so many words the accomplishment and adventures he had endured since the last letter. It went on like this for almost a year, and to Oliver he was gearing up and switching his focus to joining himself come the following year. Then suddenly the letters ended. Adam had died a hero, just like he always wanted. His troop was engaging with local militia in a country that was ravaged with civil war. An explosive took out a building's support, and he had made trip after trip into the building to rescue as many as possible. The building crumbled, and just like that, Oliver's best friend and lifelong peer had left this world. Oliver didn't cry at first. He couldn't bring himself to. He only became emotional when the day came that he would have received a letter from Adam. And that's when it finally sank in. He would never receive another letter from Adam ever again. He would never see his favorite cousin again. And with that realization came a river of tears that followed, and Oliver's mom feared her son was sinking into a deep depression. Eventually, Oliver healed, and he decided not to pursue a military career. Instead, he redirected his passion into the meaning of life and of how living organisms function and behave. He kept the love and memories of Adam alive by always holding on to parkour. The rest he switched into a passion of studying biology. Then, as space travel and the aspect of real alien life could be discovered, he added xenobiology as an extra study to entertain his work life with. It changed his life completely. If Adam hadn't died that day, Oliver's life would have veered into a very different direction from where he was now. He wouldn't be trapped on the moon at the end of a hallway with his back pressed against a hatch and a horrific scream in his throat. Yet that's how life goes, moment to moment. At the turn of a coin, everything can change, and the future you had so assured is now destroyed, and a new path is added. As Oliver opened the door to his home covered in a mean shine of sweat and some patches of black marks and dirt on his running shorts, Abigail stood in his path, glaring at him. "I'm glad you're not dead, because I plan on killing you myself." The words left Abby's lips like daggers thrown from the skilled hands of an assassin to strike at the target's vitals. "What did I do wrong?" The words were stammered out of his mouth, and they held no accountability. Oliver knew he was warned about his parkour the day before departure. He hadn't listened, and decided while Abby was in the shower, he would pop out and go. "I am beside myself. I thought this childish behavior left you 8 years ago. Don't you always say how a relationship is about understanding and openness? What the hell do you call this bullshit?" The rage and vileness of her words hung in the air, and now that they were out, they couldn't be taken back or ignored. "When will I get to run again, like I did this morning?" Oliver asked, his voice pleading and full of reprieve. "I had to be dishonest, just this once today. You were never going to let me, and sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness rather than permission." He had laid out his guilt and placed his neck on the chopping block for her executioner's axe to finish him off. Abigail's anger dispersed, and a smirk overtook her face, while at the same time her face showed a stern and reproachful look about it. "Well, it appears you didn't fuck everything up for us. Get a fucking shower and let's finish sorting out our life before we leave tomorrow." "Yes, ma'am." Oliver approached and started to slide towards her, to gather her up and kiss her passionately. Abby startled and jerked away from him. "Absolutely not! You did not just try to touch me with those filthy hands. You wanted a kiss. You could have done that earlier. In fact, if you wouldn't have snuck off while I was in the shower, you could have joined me, and we could have done a lot more than kiss." She bobbed her finger at him as she inched away and circled around him as he walked past. You say that, but last time I tried getting some shower action from you, I got yelled at for stepping on your foot during the process, Oliver said, as he made his way to the bedroom and the attached shower. Oh, that's my fault? As I recall, you were the one that slipped and stepped on my whole foot during sex. Talk about a turnoff. Here I was, cramped and helping you hold my other leg up, and then wham! All 185 pounds of man came crashing down on my only supporting foot. She scoffed. The hell was I going to let you finish? Had to go the whole day limping. I don't think that's the way guys in the locker room mean it when they say they rocked their lady so good she limped the next day. Abby had followed at a distance, and as she spoke, watching Oliver start to undress and make his way to the shower, he chose not to say anything else, lest cause any more strain to the tension between them. Oliver continued. As the shower turned on, he glanced back at his wife. Their eyes met. You know, the more I think about it, flirted Abby as she stood leaning against the door frame, it would be a shame if we left that as our last memory, spent together in our shower, she said coyly, as she unbuttoned her shirt and slid it off to expose soft skin beneath. Sounds like we get one more chance to get it right, he said, with a mischievous grin as he welcomed her into the room and closed the door.